You spend much of life avoiding pain. You call it misfortune, failure, or loss, a condition to escape. Every form of discomfort seems to contradict the meaning of peace. Yet Rumi turned this assumption inside out. He said that suffering is not destruction but cleansing, the process through which the heart becomes transparent to truth. What you call breaking may be the removal of what never belonged. In his teaching, pain is not an interruption of life, but the means through which life becomes conscious of itself. But this raises a difficult question. If suffering is an instrument of purification, what exactly is being purified? The heart itself, or the illusions that keep it hidden from what it already is? Rumi lived in 13th century Persia, trained first as a jurist and theologian. His life was defined by order, intellect, and spiritual discipline. Then he met Shams of Tabriz, a meeting that dissolved his inherited certainty. Law gave way to direct perception. Knowledge turned into awareness. Through that transformation, the meaning of suffering changed for him. What once seemed like divine punishment revealed itself as divine education. He began to speak not of avoiding pain, but of recognizing its intelligence. Through his verses, he taught that suffering is not the opposite of love, but its unveiling, the friction through which the heart remembers itself. You see suffering as something that happens to you, imposed by circumstance, by error, or by fate. It feels external, unfair, and meaningless. You divide experience into pleasure to pursue and pain to avoid. This division feels natural because it sustains the sense of control. But Rumi would say this very structure is the problem. When you declare pain to be wrong, you deny the intelligence of what disturbs you. You call it failure when it may be corrected. You call it injustice when it may be unveiling. Can you look at pain without the impulse to repair it? Or does the wish to end it already prevent you from seeing what it means? Rumi saw suffering not as proof of distance from the divine, but as the movement of the divine within human awareness. Pain, he said, is not sent to punish, but to polish. When the heart clings to what is false, life applies friction. The discomfort that follows is not cruelty, but transformation. The ego interprets this process as loss because it cannot survive transparency. But the heart does not need healing, only the removal of what clouds it. The more resistance there is, the more intense the friction becomes. What appears as life breaking you is life refining you. If the purpose of suffering is purification, then who suffers? The heart that is pure, or the image that resists becoming clear? Pain interrupts illusion. It ends the distractions that keep you unconscious of yourself. When comfort collapses, the attention that was scattered by pleasure gathers into one point: presence. This is why Rumi called pain the education of the heart. Through suffering, you begin to see without denial. You learn that awareness is not created by happiness. It is revealed by loss. Pain focuses not because it is desirable, but because it exposes dependence. In that exposure, the false sense of ownership fades. What remains is awareness itself, silent, exact, awake. If suffering brings you to what cannot be lost, was it ever an enemy, or was it a misunderstood form of guidance? You suffer most not because of what happens, but because of your insistence that it should not. The ego interprets every disruption as an injury to its order. It creates the drama of why me? And how could this happen? Yet the event itself is neutral. The resistance is what turns it into pain. Rumi observed that the wound is not in the heart, but in the mind's refusal to let the heart be free. Every argument with reality deepens the illusion of separation. When resistance ends, pain reveals its function and dissolves. If suffering disappears when you stop opposing it, was it ever in the world, or only in the refusal to see what is? There comes a moment when explanation no longer helps. You stop trying to justify, to assign cause, to restore meaning. All strategies fail. What remains is simple awareness. There, unprotected, awake. Rumi called this moment sacred because it is honest. The mind cannot hide behind understanding, and the heart cannot pretend. In that exposure, something unnameable becomes clear. What you thought was destruction is the removal of distortion. What you call suffering is only truth without disguise. At that depth, does pain still exist, or has it fulfilled its purpose by returning you to what was always whole? For Rumi, the heart is not merely a place of feeling, but the organ of perception. It perceives truth when it is clear, and it distorts when it is covered by self-interest. Suffering removes that covering. Every disappointment weakens attachment to what is false. Every loss reveals what cannot be owned. Through this process, love returns to its original form, not desire, but recognition. Pain, then, is not the opposite of love. It is the undoing of what blocks it. The heart does not become holy through comfort, but through accuracy. In this clarity, you see that nothing real has been taken. What remains after purification is not improvement, but the restoration of truth that when resistance dissolves, nothing new appears. There is only clarity, the absence of distortion. You see that what you called suffering was the friction between truth and falsehood. When falsehood falls away, no pain remains to defy it. The heart, cleansed of interpretation, reflects reality without conflict. This is not a reward, but understanding. The quiet that follows is not emotional relief, but precision, the simplicity of seeing without distortion. Suffering was the process of correction. Clarity is what was never broken. What you once called healing is only the recognition that nothing real required healing at all. If suffering ends in this awareness, was it ever more than a form of awakening? You began by fearing pain and ended by understanding that fear was the true burden. Suffering was never a flaw in existence. It was existence revealing what you had misunderstood. When pain is seen without resistance, it loses its name. The heart's cleansing is complete when even suffering is recognized as movement within awareness, neither enemy nor teacher, simply truth at work. Rumi's hidden way is not to pursue suffering, but to stop fleeing from what it reveals. The heart does not need to be made pure. It needs to stop pretending to be impure. When understanding no longer divides joy from sorrow, what remains is clarity without condition. What is left to cleanse when there is nothing left to conceal? This reflection begins in avoidance and ends in recognition. It starts with the ordinary belief that suffering is a flaw, a disturbance to be fixed. Through Rumi's lens, it becomes the mirror of transformation, the method by which illusion burns away and the heart becomes exact. Pain exposes resistance. Resistance exposes the ego. The ego, when seen clearly, dissolves. What remains is not triumph but lucidity, awareness without distortion. The journey of suffering ends not in comfort but in comprehension. The mind no longer asks, "Why must this happen?" because the question itself has dissolved. What is left is the simplicity of being quiet, transparent, awake. Suffering has done its work by revealing there was never anything real to suffer.